from one of the other student affairs interns. His name is David. He has a great presentation, and so I'm going to share my screen. He unfortunately wasn't able to be here today with us, but yes, I will share his presentation right now. So I hope you all enjoy.
Hi, everyone. So my name is David Michael Hernandez. I am really grateful to Mario and Harper allowing me to come and talk to you all virtually since I couldn't make it there. But this is my research that I did for an anthropology class. And so it's titled ANSCE 144, Immigrant and Refugee Health. So if you're interested and you have time, it's a really easy but really interesting upper division course. And so this is my presentation. So it's the exacerbation of immigrant health, a look into Latinx culture. So before we begin, oh my gosh, sorry. Okay, so before we begin, I just want to introduce myself a little bit more. So I'm a third year. I am a public health major with a concentration in epidemiology, and I have a minor in general biology. I used to be an orientation leader, and I currently serve as the student engagement and social media intern for student affairs at Muir College. And then I am an active member of Delta Epsilon Mu, which is a pre-health professional fraternity on campus, an undergraduate instructional assistant for the public health department. I'm so sorry. And then I currently serve as your AS off-campus senator. So a little bit of overview for my presentation. I'll give you the motivation behind why I chose this topic to do my research on. And then I will go into introducing some important concepts that we need to know before we get started. I'll lead into some connections, some three main concepts that I use to guide my research, and I'll give you some perspective using a male and female account, and then I'll give you something to look forward to. So motivation. So my motivation for this course, for my research, was that in this course we learned a lot about ethnographic narratives. And so it was really the first time that I was introduced to this field of research. And so I learned from different immigrant populations across the world, but specifically in the United States, we looked at Latinx populations and Syrian populations. And so I'll be focusing on the Latinx portion, but from the United States. And so I saw how they interacted with society that would receive them, their own culture and institutional barriers that they faced. When I'm talking about a receiving society, for instance, say someone immigrated to the United States in that instance would be the receiving country or receiving society. And so as a Latino and coming from a very small border town, I am from El Centro, California. So I border Arizona and Mexico, Mexicali. And so I saw a lot of these intersecting barriers, and it was something that was very familiar to me. And I inquired a lot growing up about how, not growing up when I was little, but now, how Latinx immigrants' cultures and societal views and their affiliation to religion kind of inflicted on their experience of health. And so let's just get right into it. So some important concepts to know is that machismo, it's kind of equivalent to masculinity, and it's having the ability to accentuate toxic behavior and decisions. Oh, I just want to also preface that the definitions that I give here are particular to my presentation, such as machismo and marianismo. I feel like there are a lot more other definitions and qualities that they can fall under. I'm sorry, I kind of like blanked out. And then marianismo is a term coined for machismo. And it's given the stereotype definition of a caregiver, a caretaker, and possessing feminine qualities and duties. And so we'll see later on what both of these qualities kind of look like. And so a health disparity is a term to describe the disproportionality of health differences linked to social, economic, or other disadvantages one might face. And opportunistic care is an alternative form of care to cope with the lack of access to medical care. And so this is kind of my roadmap for my research. And these are three concepts that I helped kind of guide the way that I was thinking. So we have spirituality and religion. So according to one's culture, I recognize that each culture has an associated religion to that they practice, and that religion oftentimes is used to form their moral compass or views on life. And then we have cultural and societal roles. And so one's receiving country has attitudes and biases towards a particular population that kind of help shape the foundational dynamic that society how society interacts with them. And then we can also see cultural roles within certain populations that strongly shape the presence or lack thereof of religion. And then I have the most important kind of guiding mechanism, which would be the axis and view on health. Kind of the ultimate goal for my research was to kind of see how immigrants face an exacerbation of health disparities due to either their legal status, social determinants of health, but also in the way that religion and society and cultural roles impact their views on health. So, for my first concept for spirituality and religion, the largest religious affiliation amongst Latinx immigrants, it tends to be on the Catholicism and Christianity spectrum. And both of these religions have a strong foundation of teaching family dynamic. I know in my experience, I come from a very Catholic household, so I was raised with the notion that family was my everything, and that at the end of the day, it was always God and family. And so that's kind of how I interpreted that part of my research. And then I was able to do a little bit more research on attendance. I was really interested to see how church attendance looked for this population. And it actually was kind of astonishing, but at the same time, it kind of made sense. How there was low church attendance reported for Latinx immigrants compared to non-Hispanic white individuals. But this was due to the collectivist nature, which was emphasized by the family dynamic and religion. And so that family dynamic and the collectivist nature is reinforced by religion in this situation, which I thought was really interesting. And I observed through my research that individuals who practice religion tend to have their views and behaviors guided by their respective religious teachings. Again, allowing for decisions to be made using their moral compass, which is thus influenced by their religion. And then traditional church teachings emphasize a masculine patriarchal role and a submissive matriarchal role, which we can see in cultural and societal roles. And so these two, Marianismo and machismo, I will call them stereotypes. And so these stereotypes oftentimes coincide with the patriarchal and matriarchal roles, which we can see that is established in religious teachings. And so they tend to have a superior and submissive role in the family dynamic, especially in the immigrant context. So for machismo, you're typically classified as practicing infidelity and being hypermasculine and wanting to provide for your family, oftentimes coming off as a bit toxic in your behaviors and your decisions towards your female counterpart. And then you're in Marianismo stereotype, we have the qualities of being hyper feminine, being a caregiver, but also tending to be a little bit more passive. And so the perpetuation of these stereotypes by religion has an effect on la lucha. And so la lucha is often associated with overcoming barriers in the immigrant experience. And this lucha looks different for various people because the immigrant experience encompasses so many experiences and attitudes and views. And so society thus puts these men and women in a certain scope and view as well, which kind of further complicates the way that these immigrants interact with family, how they interact with friends, and eventually their health, which we'll see a little bit later. And so the next concept and the last concept that I kind of used to navigate my research was access and the views on health. And so health disparities among the Latinx population is very low comparable to other minority groups. And so this is classified as the Hispanic paradox. However, we do see the Latinx population facing healthcare disparities at a much higher disproportionate rate. Legal status, fear of deportation, financial instability, and other sociocultural factors kind of make the access harder to obtain. But aside from the access point, We also have the views on health. And so oftentimes the quality of care and the patient physician mistrust relationship is also a big contributing factor on why the view on health is so poor in this population, because all it takes is one instance and they won't go back. Speaking from experience, but also from my research as well. So to put a little bit all these three concepts into perspective, I kind of pulled from an ethnographic narrative, and it's titled "They Leave Their Kidneys on the Fields: Illness, Injury, and Illegality Among U.S. Farm Workers." This was actually a novel that we read in the course, and so I'll be talking about Yadira. And so Yadira is a Latina. She's Christian, and she's an immigrant farm worker who resides in Mendota, California. Some context to her situation. Her husband also used to work in Mendota, California, but they both work under pseudonyms. And so they do this to prevent their identities so they don't get deported. And so they oftentimes, their employer knows that they're working under a pseudonym and they'll allow them to work under the pseudonym. But if ICE and deportation gets involved, then the employer will all of it like sometimes play dumb and be like, oh, I didn't know. And so that why like they're kind of like saving themselves from like potential trouble. And so they'll just deport the individual. But that was the case for Yadira and her husband. So her husband was deported and she was left to kind of oversee both the machismo and the Marianismo role in the family, being that her husband was deported. So we can see her taking care of her children while working early morning shifts. And so she was also left with the responsibility of the health of her children, making sure that she could both provide health, food, shelter, safety, all those things. And so that's a lot for one person to kind of undergo. And so since finances were rough and they really didn't have insurance in her situation, she had to access opportunistic care in the form of borrowing like peak flow meters for breathing, BP cuffs, and finger glucose sticks from neighbors and friends. And so we can also see in this situation, in her story, that she reported that, and we'll also see that with the men as well. But right now in Yadira's case, she had reported that as long as she had a relationship with God, she would be able to figure everything out. Everything would land in its place and she wouldn't need to fear deporting if God was on her side, because she was very active with her religion. And so with that being said, and kind of reviewing her whole entire story, we can see these intersections of religion and social roles and play a big part in her experience as an immigrant and as she navigates health in the opportunistic care route. And so next, we're going to talk about Latinx men and their view on health. And so starting on the left-hand side, behind the brain, many men report not wanting to access mental health services out of seeming local or crazy. This is kind of introducing or highlighting the immense pride that Latinx men kind of face or embody. And so we can see that pride also translate to the above point, that 70% of men would rather talk it out with family and friends compared to 18% only choosing to seek out professional services. And so this, again, we can see the perpetuation of the family dynamic. We can see the perpetuation of religion in the above, right above at the top where it says men in a study reported that asking God for forgiveness would heal them. And so we can also see the connection, how Yadira also kind of said the same thing. And so it's really interesting to be able to see how all of these qualities kind of make up the experience of an immigrant, especially in the Latinx culture. And it can become very damaging to both populations, both to male and female, and also to their children. And so the reason why health is so stigmatized for men is because oftentimes it's not tangible. So if I had a cut on my arm, it's tangible. I can see it. I can see that I need medical attention. But when it comes to mental health, it's not something that you can physically touch. Yes, there are symptoms and signs, as in being more sad and, lack of hunger. But those are a little bit harder things to convince individuals, and men in particular in this scenario, to kind of convince them that something is actually wrong and they do need professional help. And so these views from men, Latinx male immigrants, or Latino immigrants, shall I say, these views kind of have the potential to exacerbate ongoing issues in the population that they face at large for everyone. And so we can see again, after reviewing the Adira's instance and the studies that I've presented in this slide, that there's an intersection of religion going on. And we can also see the cultural and societal views that are either reinforce pride, or we can see that them being kind of like hyper masculine and not wanting to kind of like carrying it of themselves, or relying on the religion to kind of help them as well. And so that is how a religion culture kind of influences the way that male immigrants feel and view health. And so now looking ahead, we can, it's kind of recommended that the United States move towards a more biopsychosocial model of medicine, which emphasizes a holistic approach to a patient. And so this model will allow for better patient satisfaction, rebuilding the trust between the patient and the physician, and allowing the physician to see the patient as much more than just a body, improving on the healthcare disparities that also exist in the United States. When I say that, looking at a patient more than at just the body, the biopsychosocial model is emphasizing looking at, okay, where does this person come from? What's their living situation? What environment are they in? Are they in food swamps? Are they in food deserts? What's their working conditions like? What's their family dynamic like? Are they married? Looking at all these things, because all of these things do play a big role in health in general, and also the disparities that exist amongst many populations, but specifically in the Latinx immigrant population. And so in order for these health disparities to kind of eliminate themselves in this population, we must focus on interventions that target the modifiable behaviors that put this population most at risk. So that's like putting more parks in. So you increase the increased serotonin, whether it's education. A big thing of public health is education, educating masses and giving the proper resources and education to people in these communities that mental health is real, that you need to get checked up. Having pop-up clinics, things like that is where we should be putting our funds towards to kind of support all the individuals who fall between the cracks of a broken healthcare system. And although we cannot concretely conclude that religion plays a role in the exacerbation of health attainment amongst Latinx immigrants, in my research, we can notice how behaviors among this population are kind of influenced by these confounding factors like religion, which put a detrimental risk to their health in the future. And so that's pretty much all I really have. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you again to Mario and Harper. If you have any questions, or if you just want to chat or talk more about anthropology or literally anything of what I'm like involved with, you can email me. I put my email here on the slide, and then connect with me on LinkedIn. It sounds very professional, but like, if you want, you can connect with me on there. But thank you all so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a happy weeknight.
All right, that was David's presentation. Professor Dawkins, do you have a question or comment?
I thought I was just clapping.
Oh,
Sorry.
It's all good.
I meant to clap. Okay.
It's all good. All right. Okay, so awesome presentation from David. And now I will be talking about my position. Give me a second. Hopefully this works. Okay, awesome. So I'm going to give a quick little presentation about the intersection of education and mental health. I know most of y'all already know me, but hi, my name is Harper again, and I'm the leadership programs intern for MIR. So yeah, Pathways Leadership, y'all are here, and yeah, I'm in charge of that program. All right. So quick little outline, what is mental health, some statistics, what do these stats mean for education, how do students get access to mental health resources more easily, kind of like a what do you think area, And then like all of the mental health resources and opportunities that UCSD provides. And then lastly, a little reminder. So I got this straight off the internet for what is mental health. So mental health includes our emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. And some information and statistics on mental health. So my first point is that you are not alone. 1 in 4 individuals in the ages of 18 to 24 have a diagnosable mental illness. But at the same time, I do want to like mention and recognize that like while mental health illnesses are very prevalent, to recognize your personal mental health struggles and recognize them as valid, even though maybe other people are also struggling with it, but also just really, think about your own mental health, even though it is quite common. And I want to point out how this is like the time that a lot of students are in college that they have mental health illnesses, but I also want to mention at the same time, not all students that attend a university are in this age range, but a good amount are in this age range that was mentioned. Some other statistics, academic achievement can be impacted by mental health. So I got the statistic that says 31% of college students have felt so depressed in the past year that it was difficult to function, as well as this other statistic that is 50% have felt overwhelming anxiety, making it hard to succeed academically. So we can see holistically that mental health and education really are hand in hand. They go, your mental health affects your education, how well you do in classes, motivation, feeling ready to take on your academic duties for the days. And more importantly, with mental health, a lot of students don't ask for help. So 45% of students who stopped attending college because of their mental health did not request accommodations. This means that they had a mental health illness, but they did not ask the university for help. They were not enrolled in something like the Office for Students with Disabilities. They weren't getting maybe like therapy. That's kind of all under that umbrella. As well as 57% of students did not access accommodations through college disability resource centers, often citing they were unaware such services and support existed or did not know how to access them. So that's a pretty big chunk of individuals who are not aware of the resources the university has, even though there are a lot of resources. The students who are needing these resources they're not getting to these people. So we'll talk more later about what UCSD has to offer, so all of you will know, but yeah, I wanted to point this out. So yeah, what does this show? So all these statistics, it shows that some individuals in college are at the age where mental health diagnoses are common. A lot of people are having mental health illnesses and mental health diagnoses during college. And it's always important to look at education with mental health in mind, because many students are affected with their mental health illnesses, and their academics are also being directly affected. And students who are impacted by mental health illnesses do not reach out for help or do not know what resources are available or what resources that the university provides. And so some things that we can do, to help mental health resources get access more easily, to encourage more discussion on mental health and, talk about mental health so there is less of a stigma. More people are more open to talking about their mental health. Secondly, make services more accessible for students by discussing it, by discussing various resources. If you know about CAPS, which is Counseling and Psychological Services, maybe you should mention that to your friend, or other resources I'll talk about later. Try to discuss with your peers about these different resources that are free for students. And then lastly, yeah, as a student, tell friends and peers about resources they would benefit from. So going from that last point as well. And we don't have a ton of time, but I would love for y'all to type in the chat if you want to answer some of these questions, and we can kind of circle back at the end. But what do you think? What do you think, or how do you think mental health resources can be more accessible for students? How can you, me, we help combat the stigma, and anything else you'd like to share? And I already see we have something in the chat. My Psych 88 class, yes. Professor Dawkins, I'm sure we'll talk about that more after as well, but that's an amazing class and I'm in it right now. And yeah, learning a lot about, you know, your well-being, learning about your relationship with yourself and your relationship with others. Love it. And other people can also put in the chat too. I'm going to continue on though, because I know I do not have much time left. And yeah, so here's some resources. I tried gathering as much as I could. So these are some of the more common and popular mental health resources. So we have CAPS, which is Counseling and Psychological Services. And then CAPS has daily drop-in workshops, which I also have like the links here as well. There's the Office for Students with Disabilities. So this is an office that works with many different departments to help students who have disabilities or mental disabilities as well, and provide students with a better access and easier access to learning and opportunities for students with disabilities. And then lastly, this is a newer resource, but Headspace, it's free for UCSD students, and the link's here, and I'll send over my presentation after y'all, but this is a really good, it's a meditation app, and it also has focus playlists and a bunch of great resources. So I also highly recommend if you want to get into meditation, it's a great way to start. And some other lesser known resources that UCSD has, you know, you have Triton's Flourish Initiative, and they have like a lot of different resources and programs, so definitely check them out. You have the AS, or Associated Students Office of Health and Wellness, student ran office, and they have a lot of different programs for students and initiatives. We have the Zone. It's kind of like the Zone's almost kind of like a resource center, but like kind of for wellness, I guess I would explain it as. Definitely also another great one. There's the UCSD Center for Mindfulness. This is a UCSD center that has a lot of meditation practices and classes, and even classes for students. And then lastly, events by student orgs. There's a lot of different student orgs on campuses, I'm sure that y'all know. And there's a lot within those organizations, there's a lot of focus sometimes on mental health and, you know, providing those spaces for students. And those are all the resources, but I'll make sure I send them out to y'all after. And a little reminder that I just want to say, your mental health is more important than your school and work. And so I just want to like emphasize to always prioritize your mental health. It influences how we act and think, and how we function within our day. So I want to give you all that reminder. And then I just have this quote that says, mental health is a destination, but not a destination, but a process. It's about how you drive, not where you're going. And yeah, that's it for my presentation. I hope y'all enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask in the chat or ask me after. And I do see some, thank you for all the clapping hands. That's really sweet. I see in the chat some conversations happening. So continuing to have these conversations helps the stigma, so that people are reminded and aware of what can be going on. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank y'all so much. And I will pass the floor over to Professor Dawkins. Thank you again for being here.
Hi, Harper, that was really great. That was lovely. Boy, I have so much to say, and I didn't plan anything because I like to see where conversations start and then flow naturally from that. And the first thing I'm going to ask is, I'm going to say, hi, everybody. I want you to be engaged. Can you please turn on your cameras so I can see you? Because this is a conversation, and if you aren't in on the conversation, then I actually invite you to leave, because I'm here, I'm fully engaged with you, and I want to be with you. So thank you, Andrea. I hope you understand that I'm coming from a place of engagement. So I'll ask again, if you could please turn on your cameras. Thank you, Gabriella. If you don't, your workplace, thank you. So thank you, Lon. Leslie and Jennifer, can I invite you to turn on your cameras to be present? They may not be there. Or Mario. Thank you. So, hi. I'm a professor in the psychology department, and my lab studies well-being. And the name of our lab is HEAL, Human Experience and Awareness Lab. And about 7 years ago, I created a class for UCSD students on how to be a human. And it's about, like Harper said, thank you, Jennifer, nice to see you. Like Harper said, it's a class about how to have a good relationship with yourself and others, because all of that goes into our well-being. You know, there's only two types of relationships that we have, and one is with ourselves and one is with other people. But the thing is, nowhere in our education do we learn how to have a good relationship with ourselves and others. And sometimes I give talks and I'll say, isn't it amazing that in our education system, 8 billion people on this planet pretty much are in agreement that children should get an education. Like, that's pretty good consensus that basically every country has an education and public education system for children. And isn't it amazing that 8 billion people pretty much agree on the curriculum? Like, kids should learn math and science and history and their language and maybe arts. But where's the class on how to have compassion for yourself and others? Probably the most important skill, like Harper said, more important than your grades. So where do we go wrong? And I was looking up some quote while Harper was talking that was from a historian who said something like, you know, to understand where we're going as a human race, we need to understand where we came from. You know, how did we get here? What's the history of humankind? And I can recommend some really great books that really start like 100,000 years ago. And, you know, what happened when we started out as hunter-gatherers, but then at some point we became agricultural. The agricultural revolution, which was amazing, was about 40,000 years ago. And that's kind of the start of civilization, so to speak, when people started settling down and having to make villages that have governance. And there's a whole history about, like, when did the idea of like law come about? Like, when did there become like people who are policemen and who govern? And when did there become things called courts that make the decisions about, you know, what can and cannot be tolerated? So I want to ask you a question. And I really, you know, just take yourself off mute or raise your hand or whatever. In a historical context, in a historical context, 500 years ago, go back about 500 years ago, do you think that 25% of young people were suffering from anxiety and depression like they are today? And if not, why weren't they? And what were they worried about? 500 years ago, do you think that about 25% of young people were suffering from some mental illness, like Harper told you that today's young people are 25%? Do you think that number was 25% 500 years ago? And either way, what do you think people were worried about then? Yeah, Gabriella.
I think then probably people worried about.
Thank you, Professor Dawkins. You always get my mind thinking, so thank you. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you again for being here today. We really appreciate it. I'm going to send in the chat for everyone who's here for Pathways of Leadership, the attendance form. Next week is our last workshop of the year. It's been a great year, and I'm sure I'll give a spiel next week, but our last workshop is navigating to Mundos, being Latinx and LGB. And we have Sonia coming in to give that presentation. Should be a great one. And yeah, other than that, y'all are good to leave. Thank you for being here today. And yeah, I hope we can continue having conversations about mental health. You know, you can always reach out to me to talk about it. I'm very passionate to talk about it. So yeah, just let me know. Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.